Hello everyone, I am Stephen Drew from the Architecture Social, and we have a fantastic guest from halfway around the world, still part of the architecture community, still part of RIBA, and this is what's really interesting. I've been locked in the COVID. I've been told to stay at home, so it's really nice and refreshing to hear from someone in the architecture community who is in a different part of the world. So Andy Shaw, who is the chair of RIBA Gulf chapter. How are you today, sir?
Very good, thanks. Thank you for the introduction.
Amazing.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, great. And we've got it all working because, you know what it's like, we were going to do a video interview, weren't we, Andy? But you know what it's like, the audio works, so we'll jump in. So amazing. So glad this is all working. And so for anyone that has not met you before, I'm going to do a little brief introduction now. And I've got my new soundboard, which I'm sure you will appreciate as well. So before, I have my traditional bell and my horns. But we've got the full soundboard, so we can pretend like we're in a virtual audience. So, Andy, you are an architect, an educator, and currently you're based in Dubai, working on various projects in the UAE and the UK, and elected as to the role of chair of RIBA Gulf chapter in Jan 2020. Wow, that must have been a baptism of fire, a perfect time to be the chair. So, thank you for coming on. And how is everything at the moment? Is everything looking better in the Gulf at the moment?
I think overall it is actually, yeah. It depends if you want to talk first about COVID situation or building situation.
We can do both. We'll do both. It's all intertwined here at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, don't want to rub it in for you guys, but yeah, there was a harsh lockdown a year ago, about like everywhere else, like March, April. But since then, no lockdown. There's restrictions everywhere, like temperature checks. Even though the Opera House is running, almost everything's running. But university's online, so we're teaching online almost fully. Just a few in-person classes. You can go out and about, do most things, but just with caution. Everyone wears masks everywhere. That's quite policed quite strictly, as in you're told off a few times before you get fined or anything. But there are people watching. Checks to every building, a bit of reduced capacity here and there, but a pretty normal life otherwise, actually. It helps, it's a bit warm and a lot more outdoor activity. Beaches and things, open. There are a few parks and things in Dubai, golf courses. So there's not maybe quite as an indoor-based lifestyle, but there's still obviously been COVID cases and problems. But that's, along with the UK, I think a very good vaccine rollout as well. They've done over half the population here. I got vaccinated a few weeks ago. They started off a bit free-for-all, and then a bit of priority, a bit of free-for-all, then they did it by age. And now I think they've made it again, if you sign up and find an appointment, or if you walk in and you're lucky. It's not quite as strict as UK, but they managed, one of the top three, I think, last time I looked, like second for vaccinations, UK was third. But there's still, you can't travel here from UK at the moment. They did have a lot of UK people came over for Christmas time to enjoy the weather. And now it's coming up to summer, where one thing living in the Gulf, it's what's like a perfect British summer maybe for you guys when it happens in like August or something. It's like that here, November to February, March. Kind of warm, sunny every day, do nice things outside. But from about now-ish, like April, May till September, it's not very nice to be outside. It's too hot.
Really?
So it's like being in, kind of Canada is too cold in the winter or other places. Here it's kind of so hot that you're kind of forced indoors. There's obviously still cinema. That's why you have big malls like in America. There are a few galleries now, and there's not the same kind of concerts and things as UK, obviously, but there's normally something going on. But yeah, you're kind of more and more restricted indoors. Even now, the evenings are bearable, but in a month or two, even. So I try and leave the country in the summer when I can, actually, and go to Europe for a little bit and work remotely. So that getting better is going to be a big bonus. Because it's normally very, very nice weather here for the winter half, and the summer half's a bit different. You have to adjust.
Amazing. So, well, I tell you what, Andy, after all this year, as soon as the airport's open, I think there's a good chance I'd love to meet you in person. But imagine if we winded back the clocks a little bit, because currently you're a managing partner for AMA, which is that is a boutique contemporary design firm based in Dubai. But let's wind the clocks back a bit, because I'm looking here now, and so I can see that you used to work at Hopkins before. I've worked with the architecture practice in London, which is a great studio. But I mean, they're based near, was it Paddington Station? So we're talking like really Baker Street area and quintessential London. So at one point, you must have made the decision to move to Dubai, and I'm sure that's changed your life. And so, what kind of made you have that decision at that time? Was there a particular time that you moved out to Dubai and you've never looked back? I would love to know your journey.
Yeah, interesting question. A few things happening at once, but important to look back and reflect. Now, I'll just tell you my age. It might make more sense. So I'm 43. So but why that's important, I graduated in part 1999.
Oh, Andy, the microphone. It sounds like you're shouting. I enjoyed that. You're like, I'm 43!
Sorry, don't touch the mic, sorry.
You're fine, it's all good.
Yeah. So carry on. If I told you the rest, you'd guess it anyway. So I graduated in 99 in London. Grew up in Scotland, moved down to London, studied part 1 and 2 there. I worked there for 10, 12 years and generally really loved it. Had a great time. That period before financial crisis, because some of your listeners may have missed all that, was actually a really great time. And that one thing, the concept of losing your job didn't really exist. There's like, the worst that would happen is you wouldn't get a pay rise. Quite different, very positive atmosphere. Office atmosphere is very good. From what I can see, salaries haven't moved that much in the 20 years, 15 years since then even. So it was a very fun, great time. Financial crisis, quite a big change actually, and just first of all, atmosphere. In the office I was in, things got a bit more cautious and cliquey because you didn't know what was going to happen next. Obviously, redundancies all over the place. The whole atmosphere changed a bit. And around that time, actually, so a few years after that, when it was kind of kicking in, like the aftermath of the financial crisis, I was starting to think I wasn't enjoying London as much as I used to. I just got a bit older. When you get older, you kind of realize, you feel the lack of space and intensity a bit more, and maybe going out and about less, which you do in your 20s. So I'd had a great time, but I felt it's kind of ending. I wasn't enjoying it so much. I was also sort of thinking, I'd only lived in the UK in 2 cities. I'd never studied a year abroad or anything that some friends had done. So I wanted to really experience another country before it was too late. And I'd started looking around, and at that time, Asia, it was quite possible to go to Asia and work for one of the British firms there. It'd be quite feasible. And it turned out a former sort of boss from Hopkins had taken a senior job in Dubai and asked me to come join. And it took about a year to happen. But after a bit of, because it was a very tough time here as well, actually, there was a fallout of the crisis. But eventually it did happen. And so I managed to get a change of scene and a change of country. Similar time, actually, I'd met my wife at the same time, and she was also keen for a change. And there was a bit of a feeling of change. I think the financial crisis is quite a big part. After going through that, I kept my job and things. It didn't affect me directly, but it just changed the mood. And,
I can imagine.
I think then it's been up and down a bit since, but there's still a bit of an aftermath of it. So there was those few things. There was a bit of the keenness to get a change of scene, but also then a draw of coming somewhere new. Didn't have a plan to stay here 10 years though. Was a bit playing it by ear. Thought it may lead to something else. Didn't really know, but was keen for a bit of a change. I think also in my job, I was quite happy that I'd been in the one company for over 10 years and wanted a bit of a change. I was doing lots of rendering actually at the time, and was keen to do a few other things, but I was a bit stuck in the rendering hole. Just keep doing it.
Oh, you were doing the 3D viz. Yeah. Once you get sometimes when you're very good at that and you have an eye for it, that can be your go-to thing. But I can see, Hopkins great practice, and so then you move to RMJM, as you said. So I imagine That was quite tell me if I'm right or wrong. RMJM, great company, but they're quite a large company. So was it a big office that you went to when you moved out, or was it more of a smaller satellite office, or what was the setup back then?
Well, so what they're from actually my hometown Edinburgh, and I knew a bit about them, but what I didn't appreciate was that outside the UK, they were like very big deal in Hong Kong and Dubai. They're one of the most popular companies. They multidisciplinary engineering, ID, acoustics, everything in-house, one-stop shop. They would have had hundreds and hundreds of people, and they had proper kind of offices in all these countries rather than a satellite office serving the UK design office, which other ones have. When I joined, they were still pretty big, but they were going through a very turbulent period, and eventually, like the engineering department was sold, and it became just architecture. So that when I joined, there was a few hundred people. It was a big place. But then once the engineering was sold a few years later, it was down to more like 60, 70, but still quite big. But yeah, working in the Gulf is already a bit wild. Some funny things happen. It's an emerging market that has lots of opportunities in that things happen quickly. Big ideas get pushed through quickly, but also some crazy things happen.
I love it. I think it just seems like such a different landscape, literally. And as you say, I love the idea of these crazy adventures. And I mean, it's a testament to the kind of buildings and the scope of stuff that you see is amazing. I mean, we will continue and talk about in particular, because you do a lot of teaching, which is amazing as well. But just to touch upon that, you talked about like these amazing stuff. It is absolutely the projects out there, because I was involved in recruiting for one of the Amala projects as well.
Oh, okay.
And we're talking stuff out of the imagination, creating islands, creating destinations, these buildings which almost defy gravity, and something that you just think you'd never see. It's absolutely amazing. So the scale and the size and the imagination of the projects are absolutely mind-boggling. Have you worked on any one or two in particular yourself, which is pretty notable or big? Or
I've been working on recently, but I can't really talk about it.
Confidential, James Bond. Yeah, we don't want you to. I don't want you to get shot or anything. So I don't want to get you in trouble. So exciting confidential projects.
I've been invited to the British Embassy next week. And I don't know why.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I'll take your mic down again, though. You said that too loud. They're going to hear you. The British Embassy. That's amazing, though, isn't it? That'd be cool. That'd be interesting.
Obviously, when you're outside the UK, they're quite active in helping business along. Then construction is part of it, and there's some. Atkins are a very big player across the region, and a lot of British companies. Foster's doing a huge amount of work around here as well. Yes, I have been involved in some very, very, very interesting projects. I can't get into much detail. One example, was maybe because it's kind of shows what you're saying, and maybe I can explain a bit why. There's the region doesn't is. Well, 50, 60 years ago, it was just pearling and taking pearls out of the water, and before that, fishing. There's all these pictures you'll find easily, desert with one or two towers and some very different lifestyle. Oil obviously changed everything, developing very quickly. But so it does have its culture and things it's proud of, but it doesn't have the depth and the age. It doesn't have an old institution like Cambridge University or MIT or RIBA or anything like that. It had a very low population. So it means they're more focused on the future, and they like making whilst they are proud of the heritage and past, they like looking at the future and trying to make a mark on the future. Which is why there's things like the Mars probe. The UAE had a probe going on Mars recently, and they make these big splash projects, and that's what Saudi's doing now. And it's not, they don't just want a resort; they want a super sustainable resort using new materials and new experiences. There is an ambition to do new things that make a mark. And sometimes they do hit the mark, maybe sometimes not quite, but there's many times there is that interesting aspiration. And one project I'm involved in, they wanted to, they brought in these experts from California, Australia, here, all over the place. And they discussed how we haven't got MIT, Cambridge institution type thing. How do we make one? If we can't make one, how do we make a new thing? How can we rethink education? What it means for the locals, for adults, for everything. How, if we're starting from scratch, how do we do it? And we're happy to support it. That kind of thinking is is quite inspiring to be around, to really kind of look ahead and think, how can we do things better, differently? And it happens quite quickly because the government's quite directly involved and pushy. There's not much bureaucracy or layers or other things that come in to interfere. When there is a kind of vision, it can normally happen quite quickly. At the same time, I've worked on lots of projects that went nowhere, I have to say. I've got a list somewhere. Luckily, a few have been built, but it's probably only like 20% or something. I'm sure when I worked in the UK, more than half got built. But quite a few here worked on them and then just got stuck, didn't happen.
Well, when you were talking about that, it seems quite liberating because when I worked in practice, I worked for a few years, so I worked at a company called EPR Architects, and we were predominantly working on London-based projects. And when you were saying about building stuff for the future, I almost giggle in my head because I get flashbacks of dealing with Westminster Council and the kind of fitting in with London standards, which is great, and I love London, but there is so much of an impetus on making sure that your building fits with the existing context. However, in what you're on about, there's a big element of it. Sounds like placemaking, isn't it? Because you're making destinations of the future, which on one hand is super kind of refreshing because you're like, hey, I've got no one to argue about what goes where, because you almost have like you have a blank canvas in some of these places to make this project. So I mean, it sounds fun and exciting. And don't worry, I don't think we give anything away, and I'm not interested in upcoming projects, but it's just more for the listeners here to imagine this stuff. It is destination places, and as you say, in Dubai is a really good example, isn't it? Where you've got the fantastic, I forget the exact name of it, but you've got the island with the Palm Beach Island, and you're creating stuff where there wasn't projects.
I mean, again, there's those classic pictures from the Marina Palm area, which I came with Hopkins for a month 15 years ago, and I remember driving there, and there was really sand and some cranes, and then now it's like this kind of mini Toronto. I think I'm shouting. Mini Toronto.
Don't worry.
Kind of cluster of towers.
This is the most fun interview I'm having so far. It's a shame we couldn't do the video because it'd be a right kick off. So
the Palm is one iconic. That that didn't exist 20 years ago. It just came from nothing, and to see that, quite frightening. It's quite crazy. It's mostly developed now. There's talk of doing others, and there's always a bit more work being done around the coast. But anybody that doesn't know, go to look at Google Earth and just think that's a bit crazy. It's like someone's photoshopping the coastline.
I know. It is amazing. It is amazing, and I think it's fantastic. And look, I mean, if anyone was watching this, they're in the room. I can see you beaming from year to year. So you take great pride in what you've done, and I can see why you're a great representative to be the chair of RIBA Gulf. But just before we got that, because as we touched upon lately, so you used to do 3D visualizations before. You're an architect. You've got this amazing, I guess, breadth of a career. But let's talk about this because it is interesting. So you've been a professor at 2 universities. So is there anything else you don't do that doesn't go on your LinkedIn or?
No, it's all there.
It's all there. Okay, well, it's amazing. So you got into teaching.
Yes. I mean, that's maybe another interesting story where after working here for several years and being eventually again but ground down by a big practice in machinery, I had a friend that was kind of freelancing and working more on his own contract. Because here you have your visa is linked to your job. And it's fine, you can change job. It's just not quite as easy as the UK, but your right to live in the country is basically linked to your job.
Got it.
So you can have your own visa, and then you're like a freelancer, and you can plug into other companies. So I kind of was getting tempted by doing this, and I started doing that, and I had some medium and long-term gigs. Still kind of like being the same, but I found it quite refreshing, not plugged into the whole politics and structure of an office. You're just, you're there for 9 months or 3 months or a few weeks, then you're off. I started having having my child. First child was on the way anyway, and I could see there is quite sadly here a bit of culture of long hours because you get crazy deadlines.
Right.
We try and relax when there's not crazy deadlines to balance out, but there's often you got to work late or work weekend. And I could see the people with children at home, it was a bit unfair and tough on them. So I realized I wanted to control my time. And once I'd stepped out of office, I'd been asked before about teaching a bit of software or lecturing. But officers tend to say, no, we want you focusing on what you're doing. They probably also wouldn't like doing a RIBA role because it's voluntary and it distracts you. So as soon as I kind of broke away from being an office, I had that freedom. Whilst obviously if you're starting up, with the intention of to start up a company, which sort of evolved into as well. But once you have that freedom of time and no longer someone saying what you can and can't do, you can kind of take up these things. And so the option to teach came up again at actually the Canadian University through a friend, and I did that. And then that led to sort of meeting the people at Heriot-Watt here. And I've been teaching there now, I think it's 4 years I've taught. Yeah, it's 4 years there. They're on the road to being RIBA accredited, so you get a RIBA Part 1 if you study there. There's already one other university, Abu Dhabi University, that does that. And a lot of the students there are quite keen to go to the UK for Part 2 actually after, and already some are doing that. So yeah, that kind of freedom, independence, being away from a company, wanting to control my time, allowed me to teach. And I found it. I'd love to say it's because I love helping the children and stuff, but it's well, not the students, the kids. They're a bit older than kids. They're 18, 19, the first years. I do like helping them, but it also helps me quite a lot. I found it helped reset my design thinking, getting back to playing. Forced me to go look at what's going on in the architecture world. So I became much more refreshed. I was getting a bit bogged down in management, actually. So I found it quite refreshing to just talk about architecture quite purely with young people, help them. And then I started learning about education, which is also another thing to know about. And when you have a family, it's quite, you have to start thinking about how you educate them. So I found that quite useful too. And I've kept doing it because it's I found it something to do in the background. It's helpful for me, and also helps kind of at the same time I was starting up a company with a partner I have here, and it allowed, it's quite common, same in the UK, if you're starting, you have a teaching job or something to give you a little part-time income. So yeah, as I started doing it, enjoy it, keep doing it. I've taught I taught fourth year for 1 year, it was a bit different. And then I'm teaching professional practice this semester, like a baby part 3 introduction. Ooh. I taught a bit of a climate change class as well, and all online. That was linking the UK, Edinburgh, Malaysia. And I've got to see that. So I'm not a faculty member, so I don't get all involved in admissions and who does what and problem students and all that kind of stuff. It's also quite nice. I just show up.
You got the best of both worlds, haven't you?
Show up, talk, and then do my best to help people and go. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of me being an uncle. I can enjoy with my nieces and I might go home and my sister's there. But I think it's a great analogy. And what I like there is you're right. So while yes, the teaching is important. I think it's great as a tutor, as you mentioned, and it's kind of a bit what I enjoy in the architecture social of when I'm involved in CV and portfolio reviews. Yes, you want to help, but it keeps me on my toes as well. And I'm constantly learning, and you think you know something. And as you said, through being with students, your perception sometimes gets challenged, and that's what it's all about, having that dialogue. So that's amazing. And you touched upon your RIBA. You're the chair of the RIBA Gulf chapter. Now, because you're a gentleman, but you touched upon it briefly. I mean, it's like teaching and being involved as a managing partner of a practice, and being RIBA chair must take up an awful lot of your time. And you're also, as you mentioned, you're a family man. So hats off to you for juggling so much. But what kind of why did you feel the need to kind of go into to be a RIBA chair, especially when you have so much on your plate? I'd love to know what drew you to kind of want to do it.
Well, the thing is, an election, you put your name forward, you don't know if you're going to win or not.
You put your name in the hat, you're like, if it comes through, I'll do it. Yeah. But we'll see. There's lots of really good people, and you won, so well done.
I think, the big networking benefit, obviously. I'd been feeling the need to go a bit beyond just when you're in a company, you're working on a project within a site, a plot, in a company, and you're working in any company. You know, this kind of small set of the. I was getting more interested in politics and things. One thing, maybe all the stuff going on in the UK and America, politics becoming more visible. I was getting more interested in that kind of thing, and I was keen to kind of see something beyond architecture practice, and it meant buildings and things. And so RIBA does give a slightly bigger picture, and you start talking about, pushing sustainability agenda, housing. So I find that kind of opening up to go beyond a company, to bring together lots of companies, lots of professionals, talk about the bigger picture, quite probably the most interesting side of it, actually. It's always been quite good fun. It was a very good way to meet people. I mean, it's quite a pure level. I should be doing it more commercially, but I just like the way to get to meet people that they're in the industry. I didn't really get a chance to meet them, and now the reason to get together, and we arrange. Obviously, after COVID, we've gone all online this year, which we didn't anticipate coming. It's actually helped to reach out to a lot more people. So arranging webinars, bringing people onto the committee, arranging events. It's been, and people also just contact me and say, I'd like to be involved with RIBA, and have a chat with them online. So as a way to just kind of meet people for general interest, and eventually it probably is networking. It's been very helpful. But yeah, I think the main thing, I like opening up the conversation to talk about sustainability on a kind of more big picture, countrywide level, industry-wide level. And I put on my election statement. See, maybe I was just too bold. I put that I'm going to really tackle sustainability, innovation, and get more people engaged. I felt like not quite the same as London here. It's a bit harder to get people together. So I said I was going to really push for engagement with each other. And it seems to have worked. And now I'm trying to fulfill my election pledge. One thing interesting of RIBA is elections. Not many elections in the Middle East. And most, RIBA, as you know, the president in the UK, the council, there are elections for some roles. Chapter is all volunteers, so it's just people in practice come together, or education, come together, do things. But you're kind of, when you get elected, even though it's probably only, I don't know if it's dozens or 100 or whatever, but some people voted for you. Feel, I better now deliver for what I said I would do and what they want to do. And if they want to talk to me, I'll talk to them and see. So I have been trying to feel that sort of democratic pressure to do what people expect and would like to see. And then that's nice. I get emails from people I didn't know, and the email saying, "Oh yes, I voted for you because you mentioned sustainability, and so I hope we can do something." And end up setting up we had a webinar series last week with 2 webinars on really regional sustainability. That kind of stuff is all very interesting and fun as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's great, and I think do you know what's really interesting when you're talking about that, because I'm involved with a charity called the Architects Benevolent Society in the UK, and it's great. And I kind of went into it because I feel like I meet a lot of people in terms of what I do, and the charity, it will be fun, and hopefully I can help out. But and I do that, and they're an amazing charity, and part of it's spreading awareness. What we do as part of the Architects Benevolent Society is we'll meet up once or twice a year, and I have the same thing that you said, that I really enjoy it. And the best thing out of it is that I've met some amazing other ambassadors in the charity, and it's great to spread awareness. And so when you're talking about the RIBA and getting involved, and I think you're right, it is deeply rewarding. I'm sure as well, though, as you said, with RIBA, now you've got to do your sustainability thing. I'm sure it's all being sustainable. I'm sure you're making it all sustainable, which is great. So we've got your teaching. You're talking about the RIBA chair, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, because I'm quite interested to know a little bit about your current company as well, because you touched upon it briefly that when you were teaching, it was part-time. To set up your practice, which is that is actually an ingenious way. So the bills are getting paid while you're setting up AMA. I'm guessing, right? Yeah. So it's not quite like because I've set up a business in the past and I wasn't teaching, and there's an element of you go into a white room which is empty, and you put a desk and you put a computer and you've got your phone, and you think, oh man, okay, here we go. There's that moment. Yeah. But it would have been smart to teach. So tell me about, you're out there, you mentioned you were part of a big company, and there must have been that moment when, I don't know, you were with friends and you were like, all right, I've got to do my own thing.
Just I've been teaching professional practice. We covered all this, like cinema practice, how ways you can do it. There's a few routes that worked for many people, and I showed them your podcast on the CVs, by the way, the CVs and things, because they cover that as well.
Cool. I've got more coming. I've got more coming for you guys.
They ask a lot about it, actually. They really need help with it. So we covered setting up as well, and I have someone saying a similar story to me. When you're here, I assume it's the same in the UK, people run projects in a company or whatever, but sometimes the client's kind of saying, you know what, I want to work with you, not so bothered about your company, because maybe they have some other issues with the company, but saying, we want to kind of work with you directly. Why don't you? And you're like, well...
You're on the fence. You're like, maybe I thought about it, but it's a risk, it's all this stuff.
And actually, my student, was this, how does this work ethically and things? Sometimes this happens, kind of like with the blessing of the employer. I know this happened in Hopkins once or twice, and I'm sure in most practices where, they're quite happy to see one of their directors or whatever go off and starting their own thing, and even help them if they're doing smaller projects and not seen as a big competitor. So that can happen. And but eventually you get the feeling that clients would like to work with you directly. So there's a potential to do work with more control, and obviously a bit more financial reward. But the main thing is, the freedom. So that was kind of happening. But I'd always felt at some point I wanted to try doing my own thing. Even if it didn't work, I wanted to at least try it. And it seemed like quite a good time to do it in terms of didn't quite have a family yet. There was opportunity out there. The market was quite good. But the way I did it, I was kind of freelancing on a project basis. So I had some income, certainly across a year. I was managing to get little chunks of work. Teaching came along to take up a day or so. And then I had to set up a company just to freelance here. That's just the way it works, kind of as a corporate entity, financial entity. And I'd been trying to grow it and started talking to old clients and engineers and things. And some positive things happening. Actually, the first thing I pitched for, I told it won, but then it never quite happened. It was too easy. Then I started working with an old colleague who's a bit younger than me and grew up here, that we worked in RMJM, and he'd been doing his own thing a few years, and I'd helped him a bit at the start. And we basically started working together and sort of effectively merged. And after about 6 months of quite a lot of hustling and doing this and that, and came third in a competition, got paid a little bit, a few months of nothing though. Eventually we landed a big project, and that kind of set us up to become a more proper office. And we went from working in bedrooms and hotel lobbies to having an office and a proper team and things. That, because I can imagine this. So this is what I told my students: if you are going to start your own company, I'm sure a lot of people want to, try and have some work lined up, one way or another. Whether it's a side gig or a pretty solid client, a competition win, whatever, because it's very hard. It's all about momentum. If you start from nothing, it's pretty risky, really. You might find it takes a long time to get a client, or you might be lucky it comes quick, but I feel like you do need some kind. It's not just the income. You need a bit of work to start things moving, and then you do a good job. You've got your something in your portfolio to show. Maybe they recommend you for another one. But I recommend not a standing start. Either have some kind of part-time job, or teaching job, side job, whatever, or have a solid win in the bag. I can understand if somebody was in a big company, they entered a competition with their friends and they won it. That's a very good time to set up a company. And then if the job falls through, at least you tried.
Yeah, I think that's really sound advice. And I think you have to be, as you said, there's a balance between having your dreams, which are achievable, but you have to be a bit practical and commercial, especially in the first step, because what you don't want to do is set something up and run out. But I really appreciate your comments there with the Architecture Social. I mean, we can talk about it now. What I love is doing those the videos, and that came from me last year when I was on furlough, because the architecture industry kind of wound down a little bit. And it seemed at the time the best way to make content, because I was doing almost one-on-ones, but it felt like a very time-poor way of instilling my thoughts and feedback, because then I would almost do the same thing to another person and this other person, and then after I'd done about 4 or 5, I run out of time. Whereas with communication technology where it is, and with the architecture social community, so the online forum part of it, you can put a bit of content which can reach a lot of people. And so that really is the goal. And I think one of the great things even about us chatting today is there are nuances about how to attract an employer in London compared to America, compared to the Gulf. And I think that would be really good to start dissecting the regional nuances as well. Because I think you've got some core principles, especially when a student is applying for a job or an architect, where a good CV is a good CV. There's some core things which you'll see in CVs again and again, which do really well in portfolios. But there is always that regional and local sparks and finesses and things that really resonate internationally. So that would be really good to cover at some point, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Andy, as well. But speaking specifically with opportunities, so because there's a lot of people that listen to the podcast who could be students, but as well, we've got a lot of architects in the architecture social community. And so if someone was currently in the UK right now, I mean, let's be hypothetical that the airports open up, or maybe there's someone in a month or two that discovers this podcast episode because they're interested in working in the Gulf and want to be involved in RIBA. Is there any little first steps or advice you'd have to someone in that position?
Yeah, see, now, it used to be when this came up, I would advise just to come here and go meet people and be on the ground ready to start if you could do it. It's obviously not quite possible now, but if we're talking a few months ahead, it may still be. And if you do have any contact here, even a light one, I think dropping on a line, seeing what's going on. It's not a very big community industry, and there's only a handful of the big companies, the ones you'd have heard of, Woods Bagot, BDP, they all have offices here. It's quite a relatively small community, and you might find what's going on. Often they win a big job and they have to hire, and it's all a bit random and unpredictable. That's kind of the way it goes. Things happen quick, and there's big projects that start and stop, and so they're kind of a bit hiring on waves and here and there, and sometimes just right CV landing at the right time. From there, you obviously can research what's going on. So, the UAE itself, it had quite a tough year last year. It was already suffering of oil price and then COVID hitting its tourism industry. But it seems the start of this year, a lot of people I speak to are very busy. I think they're kind of bouncing back. They may well be busy, though, with work in Saudi, which I mentioned earlier. I don't know what you're hearing. Saudi is in the middle of a transformation, in the middle of a cultural and physical transformation. I went there just before lockdown for some sort of BD business meetings, and it's just kind of funny that UK was in a bit of a kind of Brexit, will we, won't we rut, a bit down about things. They were very excited because they can go to the cinema all of a sudden, and they can go to live music was allowed in public. Very quickly, the laws that were quite restrictive are changing.
Right.
And they're excited about seeing what looked like normal life in other countries coming to them. And so that was a kind of cultural transformation. It goes alongside the physical transformation. You've probably seen the main ones published in Tazeen, more the high-profile ones, the Red Sea Resort, Amala, Neom, the Line City. Neom's going to be a huge thing, a whole new city, built from scratch. They're in the middle of master planning it now. But there's other one, and then, the more cultural, historical side as well. There's huge developments. There's also just lots of housing, lots of parks for Riyadh. They're trying to really transform the country with construction. And I think we're probably at the start of a wave of that going into real work, like master planning, infrastructure's finishing, the worker housing, and then there's going to be a lot of big projects coming. Some of that will be done from, some have already been done, London and things, but some also will be done from Dubai, UAE, because there's lots of consultants and designers here, and some in region. So I think there will be opportunities to certainly to go and be client side in Saudi. I know they're going to lead a lot of design managers, project managers. And I think anybody in the UK that's worked on a kind of a big project, an entertainment or cultural project, something like an Olympic type big infrastructure thing, or even just big housing, they'll be quite interested in just the kind of the management skill of delivering a project. Kind of smaller scale UK stuff, it might be too different, but the big stuff will be quite interesting for them, I think. And then Dubai is actually quite a bit of a drop in population. A lot of people left last year of COVID, and you are tied to your job. But there is, I think there may be a little bit of a lift again, and it's probably the easiest. Dubai is the easiest city, UAE's easiest country to kind of integrate into. It's the most international. It's apart from the weather, it could easily be one of the other international cities. It's pretty similar, and you see all the same shops, and you even have British universities and institutions here and things.
I've got a friend who's a teacher who went to Dubai and she's never come back. She loves it, so I get it. It's and I'll meet her. I met her in a wedding, and I'm like, "Are you ever going to come back to Wales?" Because we're both Welsh, and she's like, "No chance." And every time I see her on Facebook and stuff, she's living life, in the sun, and I have at that moment where I'm just like, "Oh man, this one seems amazing."
The other thing I want to try and get across in our meeting on Wednesday for RIBA is that there are the beaches and hotels and things, but actually a lot of people here, especially if they're kind of over 30, are living in a pretty normal kind of house with a garden and a dog, taking the kids to school. It's quite maybe a bit closer to American lifestyle, but there's quite a normal side. You just happen to see if it comes up on Instagram or friends' pictures, it's going to be like the beaches and the shiny stuff.
The trendy bits.
They're always, because it is such a tourist-dependent place, they're always looking for a new activity to do, whether it's a skydive or some restaurant in the air or whatever. But there are, there's a lot of people, a big cycling community here. There's a very nice 150k desert cycle track.
Good.
All kind of golf and football and a lot of sporty stuff. So it's probably a more normal lifestyle than people might think. And it's just maybe a bit more American. You sort of have to drive everywhere, and a bit of Truman Show type suburbia. But probably more, especially UAE. But I think all of them are kind of developing that way a bit.
I think it's really interesting because it was really hard for me to visualize what it would be like, whether if you go out there, you're like a bachelor in a small room, but but the fact that you're talking about that you can have a nice, as you said, a Truman kind of idyllic suburbia with your kids, and that's really interesting. I mean, and I'm not looking for the specifics here, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, but the idea I had when the idea of go working international is that you've almost got to be, so first of all, if you were going from London to the UK, you've got to be okay with actually relocating. So whenever I work on roles which require an international aspect of relocation, the first thing I always say to someone is like, right, are you serious about a move right now? Because it's not a holiday per se, is it? We talked about there's nice parts of it, but you're leaving and you have to be okay with leaving. And as you joked about at the start, you're like, I'll pop out for a bit, and you've been, in the Gulf for 10 years. So I think that, and you touched upon it really nicely there as well, where you said employers, there's opportunities out there, but I've noticed that it can work for people who want to currently work in the UK or vice versa, that employers, I always think, will gravitate towards people who are there on the ground because it shows a level of seriousness and conviction in the search. But that's for me more commenting on what you're saying. But what I was going to say is my idea of working in the Gulf is that there's a trade-off because you're not, so especially if you're relocating, you're no longer going to be in the UK. You've got the pros and the cons depending on how you look at it, the new lifestyle, the new change, and to many it's going to be a plus. But if for instance maybe you're precious about, as you're saying, it being too hot outside in the summer, maybe it's not the place for you. Obviously, you've got air conditioning and stuff. But compared to a traditional UK, the idea I had is that you sometimes work 6 days instead of 7 days, and the salary and the tax benefits are better than the UK. But the trade-off is that you're not working in the UK. And we don't need to go into the specifics, but that generally is my perception on what it's like.
You don't necessarily work 6 days. I mean, site tends to be 6 days. Some quite intense workplaces, but some are more normal. It is probably quite hectic, fast work. I don't know if the hours are worse in London, though. I think salaries are a lot higher still than UK, and the pound has got weaker, and you're basically pegged to the dollar in the Gulf countries, and you don't pay tax. There's no income tax, there's no national insurance. Alongside that, so I mean, your salary could double quite easily, your net salary.
Wow.
But I mean, you're then outside the system, like, so you've left the pension system, and you have to think about that. Your health, you do have health care, well, your employer has to give you health care. You have to check you're getting good health care, and that they give it to your family as well. Education, like you have to pay for school, which is not cheap if you have lots of kids. But then a big client would probably give an education allowance, but a small company probably can't afford to. Probably the bigger negative is that it's more volatile, and that you may be lucky, you may have managed to stay in a job for 10, 20 years. You may find that your company, all the work stops for whatever reason out of their control, and they have to let everybody go. You have to be more able to jump between jobs, or know that it is a bit more volatile. There's companies can let you go more easily and more quickly. I think that's probably the biggest risk. And as you say, you're leaving. You have to be quite confident you're leaving the country. It's a bit different if somebody asks you just for one summer to do help on something. But if you come here, I remember selling all my stuff online and seeing my 10 years worth of London stuff vanished down to 1 or 2 bags, and then shipped 2 boxes and it's from this empty flat, and then appear here and grow up again. So yeah, I think, as you said, it does help to be on the ground to show that you're serious. Saying that, if you'd worked in the UK on any project in the Gulf, which is quite possible if you're in a big company, that would be seen as a positive. If you had really good experience, they might just, at some point people come here. It is also, once you've done any work here, it's easier to get another job. When you've done none, it's harder. So if you've done some from the UK, that's good. If you really had something very appropriate experience, like you worked in a stadium, they're building a stadium, it might be enough to get you to come and say, yeah, that's good enough. But I think overall they'll appreciate the UK's education, and any work experience you had there is solid and thorough. So you've still got a pretty good shout, but you've probably got to tailor the right company, the right information.
Yeah.
I've got the doorbell ringing. I think it's
go for the doorbell.
Okay,
go for the
you
door.
can edit this out.
I'll edit that out.
Done. Sorry.
No, take your time.
Yeah.
I had a live stream the other day in the Amazon man cave, so it's
the normal these days. Yeah.
It's just totally the normal. But I think, look, that's great. That's a really well-rounded picture of it, and like everything in life, you've got to weigh up what works for you and your personal situation and what you're okay with. I think that's amazing. So we're coming up to like the 45-minute mark, and so I think we've got a bit of an overview. And I think what's great is I love the fact that we've got in your journey, because then it's really relatable, and I love the fact that we're talking now about what you're up to currently, your sustainable agenda. We touched upon you're now you're the RIBA, the Gulf chair, baptism of fire, in the thick of it. But what's the next agenda for you right now? And is there anything in particular that you'd like to share on the podcast with the audience?
Take it a bit as it comes. See what comes
yeah,
up.
exactly. You're like, hey, I'm here. It's all good. If you want to come here, drop me a message. I'm Andy. Yeah.
If anyone wanting to know more, I'm always happy to talk and get yourself. If anybody comes to you want to follow up, always happy to answer any questions on lifestyle or more specific things. For me, I mean, it depends a bit what comes in the door. I'm hoping we've had some very interesting work last year as feasibility work that we're hoping becomes real work this year. Teaching's about to wind down for the term, so maybe think a bit for next year. I'm keen to. I find what's going on in 3D printed construction very interesting, and there's a government push here to get that into more buildings in the next decade. Keen to get more involved with that. I don't have a big plan. I just see what comes up and take as it comes. Yeah,
you sound like me. Every day as it goes, isn't it? And look, I really appreciate you reaching out. It's been a really great chat, and I think that for anyone that's thinking, especially to relocate to the Middle East. I think this is a fantastic intro. And so I will put all your contact details down for everyone to get in contact now. And just before we go, I really appreciate you saying that you enjoyed the CV review. I'm more than happy to do any of that if you want me to help. But the architecture social community, I'm not too sure if I've invited you yet, because we've been speaking on LinkedIn. But right now, I think, just so you know, and it's like a little update online. So when we're about 4,000 members on the forum. Wow. Yeah, so it's all there, and it's super, super cool because there's a lady called Tara Carl who I had the pleasure of meeting, and she talks about, she's got her own group within the Architecture Social where she talks about speaking English as a second language. So that's really cool right now. There's a lot of really exciting stuff for students. So Andy, as a professor, I would love to get your thoughts. I think you need to crit me on what we can and can't do on the social, and maybe we can get you to have a guest appearance or something for the students. So amazing. I haven't used my soundboard yet, so I'll have to give you a big clap. Thank you very much, Andy. You've been an absolute legend. Andy, absolute pleasure. Andy Shaw. We'll have all the contact details there. You are on LinkedIn. You are the managing partner of AMA, RIBA Gulf Chapter Chair, and a visiting professor, and Dubai Future Research Contributor as well. And, gosh, I'm not going to say this correctly. It's going to test my Welsh accent. Adjunct professor?
Adjunct professor. I know how I became one. It just means you're not faculty, you're not permanent.
It's the best of both worlds. It's the hope is 50-50 of university. It's the fun bit. And thank you so much, Andy. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I will end the podcast here now, but stay on the line. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yay.
Yeah.